Hello and welcome to another episode of Death by Bunjie. On this one, viewer request, how do you calculate FOC? In particular, what was the FOC, the front of center, for Genevieve's main hunter arrow that she used to kill her big black bear in Maine this fall? The main hunter arrow to kill a Maine black bear. It's even got a bear on the logo. Right here. These were a gift from a friend of Bunjie. I know I keep mentioning that, but I am so happy that Genevieve got a chance to kill a bear, a Maine black bear, with one of these arrows, just like I did years ago with Bunjie, right? Genevieve killed hers with Bunjie Jr. How cool is that? But we got the perfect opportunity to calculate the FOC, the front of center, because I have a handy little tool for the job. And I want to thank, right here, oh, this is a heavy one, Dan Cave Outdoors. I want to thank him for sending us a whole bunch of really good crossbow related arrow building, arrow testing, arrow knowledge, arrow information tools. Check this out, Dan Cave Outdoors. He makes this stuff himself. This is like a 5-pound weight that I'm going to demonstrate and show you how it works. We're going to start by showing you this guy. Look at that. This is one of my favorite devices of all time. This is a device known as an arrow indexer, at least that's what I call it. This one from Dan Cave Outdoors has the heavy-duty plastic arms. It has a really nice aluminum base. It's got your choice of doohickeys on here to do the spine indexing with, a measurement tool, the gauge. Comes with a really heavy weight that we're going to use for that purpose as well. It doesn't come filled. You can fill it up. And I want to point out that Dan Cave Outdoors offering us a discount. Details in the description of every Death by Bunjie video. I want to thank him for this. So you should check him out. He's a friend of Bunjie going way back, a crossbow enthusiast. And this is also long enough you can do it with your vertical bows if that's what you choose to do. I guess your lesser forms of archery, if that's what you prefer, which we do not. But to do this, and you got to bear with me, I'm doing it backwards so you can see what I'm doing. But we put the arrow on there, and then we take the weight, and we very carefully place the weight on the arrow on the shaft in the middle. We kind of want it in the same place, regardless of how you do it, you're going to want it in the same place. And then you're going to read that gauge, the scale there, while you're turning your arrow very carefully to make sure that you're not applying pressure up and down. Because what it is doing is it's measuring the flex of that arrow and allowing you to find out where it's stiffest, right? And that really does affect arrow flight. I have found, in my personal opinion, that of all the things you can do as far as arrows are concerned, spine indexing is the most important tool. All these things are important, but that one has a greater effect on accuracy, in my opinion, across the board with your dozen arrows that you buy than anything else. So if you want to look into one of these, it's a very good investment. I did another video on spine indexing. Check it out. That's a very valuable thing to know about, okay? And I really do like it. That's like the first step. The next little tool that he sent us, and this is also important, I believe, you put your broadhead on this arrow, see, and then you spin the arrow. And what you're doing is you're looking at the tip of that broadhead, that 3-inch swahacker, that nice long ferrule that you got on here. You're going to spin this bad boy and watch it and make sure it's not wobbling all over the place. Because a straight arrow flies a lot better than a crooked one. That's where the phrase straight as an arrow comes from. We want straight arrows. And that is also very important for perfect arrow flight. But this little tool, you can get one of those on his website as well. Again, links in the description. But if you're building your own arrows, you're putting in inserts, you're putting in your own nocks, that sort of thing. I have an arrow saw. I've shown that on Death by Bunjie. You go through, you saw off your arrows and make them the right length. And then you want to put them on a tool like this and shine it up. And if you're using Burt Coyote Luminox, I have one from that company as well. Real handy. What you're going to do, you're just going to pull out your nock, right? Pull out your nock, and on your bare shaft, before you go hunting, you want to give that a quick twist, blow it off, and then put your nock in there, right? And that way, boom, it's going to light up for you. Very important. But the star of this video is this little guy right here. Now, I'm not the biggest proponent of FOC. When I build arrows, I'm not building them for front of center. Front of center is essentially, when you look at your arrow, how far forward is the front of center, the weight distributed. Now, a bare shaft, no fletchings, no nocks, no inserts. A bare shaft should balance right in the middle because it's the same weight across the board, right? So it's going to balance right in the middle. But the heavier an insert you get, the farther up front your front of center is going to be, right? The farther forward. And you can put it on your finger, but it's always a little difficult on your finger because your finger's not perfectly flat. Doesn't like to do that. Can't mark it at the same time or whatever. I mean, it gets you close, right? But that's why this tool is so handy. But you can see the front of center. This one balances farther forward than center, okay? So it's how far front of center does it balance. The reason that's important to a lot of people, I think this comes from the days of traditional archery and the vertical guys, right? The lesser forms of archery, as I like to call it, as a crossbow purist. But those lesser forms of archery, it's very important to have that front of center to make sure that you have proper arrow flight. The other reason front of center can be important, a lot of people think, is because it adds penetration power. The arrow is following that heavier point, and once it makes impact and goes through the animal, that point poking out the other side, that weight is going to add enough weight to hopefully, if it needs help getting through the other side of an animal, that extra weight's going to help pull it through. However, in my opinion, as a modern crossbow hunter, penetration is just not an issue for us with modern crossbows. It's just not, unless you're hunting elephants or something. I mean, why do you care about penetration? This thing, this arrow, this exact arrow, actually went through a deer in Maryland, through the shoulder blade. It exited with a 3-inch cutting diameter, a 3-inch Swahacker, 150 grain number 243. Went through the shoulder blade of that doe, came out the other side, hit a rock, and veered immediately off to the left and went 40 yards. You don't need penetration power. That's not even something I care about at all. Times change. I've been talking about that on Death by Bunjie. And as crossbows and their power improves and just gets greater and greater and greater, I'm actually looking for ways to reduce penetration so I don't have to go 40 yards to find my arrow. Thank goodness for the Burt Coyote Luminoc that lit up so that I could see this arrow 40 yards away, even in the daylight. That's important. That's why we hunt with lighted nocks. When we talk about penetration also, keep in mind, I always talk about momentum or kinetic energy. That's something we're talking about when we talk about penetration, the energy that comes out of these crossbows. It's speed and weight. That's it, right? Mass and velocity. It is not FOC. The FOC is not a part of that equation. A couple things we're going to do here. So I am on deathbybunjie.com and I'm going to go to calculators, okay? I'm going to calculators and you'll see on that website we have lots of calculators put together by, I'm the idea guy for these, but Old Grumpy Hunter, thanks to him, we actually have working calculators. None of these are going to be perfect on every aspect of everything. They don't purport to be the most perfect answers to all of your crossbow questions, but they really, really do provide an awful lot of good information for discussion purposes. They do demonstrate one arrow to another. They do demonstrate differences between one crossbow and another, and that's the intended purpose. Go click on Arrow FOC Calculator. I'll do that, and we have a really neat graphic here that he put together, Old Grumpy Hunter style. Arrow length, and then the balance point length from the back to the balance point. And then Old Grumpy Hunter does what he does best, which is make it really complicated with a whole bunch of mathematical formulas that don't impress me one bit, Gary. They don't impress me one bit. The idea is you're looking up above here, look at the graphic. That's what I get my information from, is cartoonish graphics. I prefer that. But we've got the arrow length, which is the overall length of the arrow. And we're not including the point. We're going from the end of the insert to the throat of the nock. You will see, and I'll just explain that in just a second. And then we're also taking into account the balance point. How far is that from the end? But first thing I'm going to do on these, I'll tell you what the weight is. First one is a Death Stalker arrow, stock Death Stalker arrow. It does have blazer vanes, this one does. It is a Black Eagle Executioner. In this case, I've added a deep power nock. These are the ones I shot in the live stream the other day. Really neat little nocks if you want to check them out. Check out those live streams. But I'm going to balance that guy on here real quick and tell you that arrow, as it sits right now, is 292 grains on the nose, this whole thing. Now what we're going to do, we're going to set this bad boy over here, and I'm going to need a tape measure, which I happen to have right here. We're going to get that guy to balance. And we're going to run the tape measure out. And I'm just going to eyeball it for the purposes of this and tell you what I'm measuring. But from the throat of the nock, which is the part of the nock where the string makes contact, and that is approximately there, to the end of the arrow. Now this arrow is 20 inches, and if you look at it here, it's a little longer than 20 inches because of that, but I'll say it's 20.25 inches, 20 inches and a quarter. But it goes from the throat of the nock to there, and our balance point is right here, which is at 10 a little over 10.5 inches. So I'll tell you 10.6 inches. If we go to the calculator, we've got an arrow length of 20.25. And then the balance point we said was 10.6 we're going to use because it's a little more than 10.5. Now this is a very light insert in this arrow, and you're going to see the difference real quick. But the overall balance point isn't much beyond front of center, okay? Calculate the FOC, 2.35%. Now we're going to see a vast difference. We're going to jump from there to a heavier arrow, and this is a zombie slayer. Ooh, this one you'll see has an aluminum insert, that Deathstalker arrow, but the zombie has a brass insert that weighs 110 grains. It's much heavier. This zombie slayer, right? This is an Excalibur friendly zombie slayer that I built, and we're going to put the weight on there. 411.7 grains, just the arrow setup, right? That's without a broadhead. When you put a 150 grain swagger on here, and that's what Bunjie likes. Now I'm going to balance that guy on here, and you'll see the difference right off the bat. Right off the bat, you're going to see the difference if I get it to balance. And it's so much easier to balance on this tool. This is another tool, of course, from Dan Cave Outdoors. Check it out. And he gives you a discount on there too. But we're going to go from the throat of the nock, which on an Excalibur is the end of the arrow. It's the flat nock, so it's going to be from right there. And this arrow overall is 20.25. We're going to go with that as an estimate. But here we're at just over 13. We'll go 13.2. It's a little bit over because we want decimals. So we still got the 20.25, but we're going to go to 13.2 and calculate it. The drum roll, 15.19%. Look how much forward we have moved it. We've moved it from middle. Before we only moved it that far. We only moved it 2.35% on this arrow with this light insert. We only moved it 2.35% from the middle. Okay, that's all that was. This is up to 15.19% from the middle, much farther ahead. Now, the difference is, though, this is intended to be shot from the Scorpid Deathstalker, a very low poundage, happy crossbow. And when you pull the trigger, it just shoots pretty fast, like close to 400 feet per second, but it flings this thing and it wants a nice balanced arrow. And that's why Deathstalker, that's why Scorpid calls this the right arrow. This is the factory arrow. Once you've spine indexed these arrows, they shoot great out of the Deathstalker, but they aren't going to shoot great out of an Excalibur necessarily. You understand? That's why I'm saying the vanes matter, the nock matters, the weight up front matters, the FOC matters, but what you're shooting it out of really, really matters, right? This arrow shoots great. I hit a woodchuck at 81 yards with one of these arrows. This exact same setup. So it shoots great, right? So that crossbow, you can say, really likes 15.19%. This one's being shot out of a very slow crossbow, 250 feet per second, and it wants, not balanced at all. It's a recurve crossbow, right? It wants a nice, heavy front of center. Ravin! How about the Ravin arrows? I like a good Ravin arrow. I like a good Ravin crossbow. Happen to have one. But the Black Widow arrows, this is a stock Ravin arrow, and that's all I use. I'm a Ravin fanboy, so I only use the Ravin arrows on the Ravin crossbows, if you know. That's a Death by Bunjie thing. I only use the Ravin arrows on the Ravin crossbows. There's a reason for that. Some of you are getting this joke right now. Some of you are laughing, I'm betting. But this is a 315.3 grainer right here, 315 grains with a brass insert. Not all brass inserts weigh the same, but they typically are a little heavier. This is probably a 90 grainer if I had to guess, or 70 or something like that. I don't know. But it's a brass insert. But we're going to balance that guy. Probably, see, is not as far forward. It's more in the middle. Throat of the nock, we're measuring it from the throat of the nock to the end of the arrow. 20.25 appears to be a good estimate, and it is balancing around 11.25. So 20.25, we'll plug that in to the deathbybungie.com Old Grumpy Hunter, and that was, what was it again? 11.25. Old Grumpy Hunter calculator, and kaboom, 5.56. These are not big numbers, right? A lot of you guys, the guy who asked about this, and we're going to get to the main hunter, but the guy who asked about this was specifically asking about Genevieve's main hunter arrow, and I bet we're going to find out that's a bit higher, but he's a guy, sounds like probably, who's more interested in front of center, in a higher front of center arrow. Talk about penetration, right? This thing, again, blows through the shoulder blade of a deer and still went 40 yards. Front of center was not necessary to accomplish that whatsoever. It's only 5.56. So again, look at front of center. Get one of these tools and look at it if you're building arrows. Look at it to compare the arrows and decide on the best arrow setup for your crossbow, because it does differ depending on your broadhead, your vanes, your arrow, your crossbow. That is very important. We're talking about different crossbows. The Scorpid has a very gentle touch flinging that arrow. The Bunjie does not have a gentle touch at all. Just boom, it's coming out of there like all that energy all at once. You pull the trigger and that recurve crossbow is just going to put all the energy into the arrow all at once. So you need a real stiff zombie on here, real heavy front of center, big old helical vanes and everything to get that thing spinning and get that point pointing in the right direction, staying in the right direction. And you got no problem, even at 81 yards. Even at 81 yards. Here's another zombie. When we talk about zombies, now this one has an aluminum knock that I put in here, and I did that for a reason. It's just an aluminum knock, flat knock, all smoothed up. But I put that in here because this arrow is heavy. Oh yeah, I jacked up this one. This one has inserts up to about here. So like the inserts probably go past the front of center. Do you know what I'm saying? So let's put this one on the scale. If it doesn't break the scale, I don't know. You can do curls with this thing. We're going to put it on the scale. Are you ready? Oh, just climbing. It's climbing. 857.2. 857.2 with a 150 grainer on here. I think this thing puts me over 1,000 grains total arrow weight. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, boy. I did a podcast on this if you want to go listen to it. Move the tape measure for this one. This is pretty cool. So we'll measure this from the end of the knock to there is 20 and a quarter. That shouldn't surprise anybody. 20 and a quarter. We'll plug that in so I don't forget. 20.25 tab. But man, are you ready? It balances at 15.25, 15 and a quarter inches. So I'm going to plug that in. Wait till you see what we got on here. And this is why the Dr. Ed Ashby stuff does have some relevance in crossbow hunting. Because if you're using an old slow crossbow, you want more weight. You don't want 1,000 grains. I built this arrow as a test. I did a podcast on this, and there is more coming on this arrow. So be ready. Stay tuned. Subscribe. Stay tuned to Death by Bunjie so that you get to see what I do with this arrow. Right? I mean, this is brass clear up to here. The reason I put the aluminum knock in it is because I was afraid when I pulled the trigger, there's so much weight up front that arrow, the inertia would be so difficult to get it moving, right? Because inertia is an object in motion tends to stay in motion, but it's also an object that's at rest tends to stay at rest, and this thing does not want to move. So I was afraid when I pulled that trigger, the string would bust a plastic knock, so I put an aluminum on here. I still haven't figured out what lighted knock option I'm going to hunt with this, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. So 15.25, we got that on the screen. Let's hit calculate. Ready? Do you have any guesses? What's your guess? Before I hit calculate, what's your guess? Think about this. You ready? Here it goes. Kaboom, 25.31%. Now, if we look down here on the Dr. Ed Ashby, that's extreme. I would say that's pretty extreme. Large, extremely large game, elk, black bear, wild boar, grizzly bear, etc. So, yeah, I think we can do that. I think this, with a proper shot, I could put a swahacker through just about anything with that arrow. Wow, that's a doozy. But here is the one that the friend of Bunjie had a question on. I know he's waited patiently for this, so I appreciate your patience, and hopefully this accommodates you and makes you happy. 392.8 is the weight for this main hunter arrow. Thank you, friend of Bunjie, Alex, for this beautiful arrow. And I'm so happy I was able to modify them and get them working for Genevieve. And she killed a black bear with it. This one has a new fletch igniter knock in it. And we got a brass insert up front. Goes to 17. 17. We're going to change that because she has a crossbow that is a micro Excalibur. It shoots 16.5-inch arrows. So this is 16.5 overall, but then you put the knock on here and the brass insert and all that sort of thing. That is what changes the overall length. And this one balances at 10.75. 10 3/4. 10.75 tab. And we will hit calculate, and kaboom, 13.24% according to deathbybungie.com, according to Old Grumpy Hunter, and Death by Bunjie's our collaborative effort of calculators. So that's pretty cool. So there is the overall FOC of Genevieve's main hunter arrow and a lot of other arrows. And you can see that there is not one solution. I made perfect shots with Ravin arrows, stock Ravin arrows, that went right through the deer and blew through a deer, through a shoulder blade, and still went 40 yards after hitting a rock, right? Did that with perfect accuracy at 20 yards, 22 yards on that shot, right? We got that. And then on top of that, we have, to contrast that, we have this one, real heavy arrow, not stock at all, a lot more FOC, 81 yards, hits a woodchuck. 2 separate arrows, 2 separate crossbows. There is not one size fits all in this scenario. You have to have multiple arrows for different crossbows. And it's one of the reasons I don't really like having lots of crossbows, but then again, it's another reason I kind of like having multiple crossbows, if that makes any sense, because I get to play with different arrows for each one. And then we've got Genevieve's. So if you're not impressed with 13.24% FOC, if you think that it should have been more, or it should have been less, whatever, but a lot of people say it should have been more for a black bear, right? Because here we look at high FOC, according to Dr. Ed Ashby, that's good for rabbits, right? Come on. But if you want a black bear, it's got to be extreme FOC. But this, out of Bunjie Jr., still went through a black bear with ease, buried itself in the dirt, and she found it later on. Everybody's happy. We took the bear home and got it in the freezer, right? And she's going to mount the bear and everything. It's going to be awesome.
New record.
It isn't a number that we're chasing here. It is the overall arrow setup, and it's the overall concepts, right? And that's what these calculators are just gold for. And I thank Gary for all of his help, and I pick on him, of course. But the reality is, it's so valuable to have all this information. And I want to thank Gary, but I also want to thank Dan Cave Outdoors for helping out Death by Bunjie, for sponsoring us, basically, right? He sent us this stuff. He is supporting the channel. You guys get the benefit of some discounts. That's in the description. And I really, really hope you will take advantage of it and check out some of these cool tools. Thank you for watching this episode of Death by Bunjie. And until next time, all hail Bunjie.